What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Playmakers podcast. I'm your host for today, Simon Villanos, aka Coach V. It is April 27th, 2026, when I am recording this episode here, and we are bringing you yet another 2026 Women's College Flag Football recap. It is Conference Championships season here, plus we also included the NAIA East Independence Tournament as well, because the winner of that tournament got an automatic bid to the NAIA Invitational. But on this episode, we're talking about Conference Championships all around here. We have a whole bunch to talk about with the KCAC, the Sun Conference, and then a number of D3 conference championships as well. The Northern, Empire 8, United East, Atlantic East. So a whole bunch to talk about on this episode. Let's go ahead and hop right into it.
What is going on, folks? This is Gino with the Playmaker's Corner podcast, and we got some conference tournament action coming at y'all here for the NAIA division in the 2026 Women's College Flag Football season. More specifically, I will be taking a look at the Independent or the NAIA East Conference Tournament, as well as the 6th ever KCAC Tournament. First up here, we're going to jump right in and take a look at the first ever NAIA East Conference Tournament here. This tournament will consist of number 3 ranked Milligan, number 9 ranked St. Francis, number 16 ranked Lindsey Wilson. Then you also got Campbellsville, Siena Heights, and Cumberland. There were definitely some great teams involved here in this tournament, and there were also some big surprises here in this tournament as well. So let's jump right into it and take a look at what happened in this one here. We are going to go ahead and start off here with the pool play games from Thursday, April 23rd. First up here, we had number 3 Milligan start off the conference tournament action here with a narrow 20-12 win over their familiar foe, Campbellsville. Looking at the stats here, it looks like Ashton Weirley would be the one starting in this game, and she, spoiler alert, would actually end up be starting the rest of the way here for Milligan. And I'm not exactly sure what's going on with Bridget Kaiser. I'm sure there's an injury of some sorts. Hope everything is going okay there. But looking at the stats here for Weirley, another contender here for the Utility Player of the Year, by the way, this will definitely add to her case. She went 16 for 28 for 175 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 1 interception here. And then she went ahead and went crazy rushing the ball with 14 attempts for 123 yards and a rushing touchdown. As far as receivers go, Krista Quinn led the way with 5 receptions for 72 yards and a receiving touchdown. And then Abby Lynn Laprice also had a receiving touchdown here for the Buffaloes. Defensively here for Milligan, Parker Bridges led the way in flag pulls. No surprise there. She had 8 flag pulls, 1 tackle for loss, and an interception. Also here making a big impact defensively, we had Annabelle Rhodes, who had 2 interceptions in this 1-score win for Milligan. Checking out the stats for Campbellsville here, Corrine Talkington went 27 for 46 for 233 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions here. Definitely not her best game, but she did add 2 rushing touchdowns in this one. Defensively here for Campbellsville, Woody Tamaya led the way with 7 flag pulls. Then you had Ella Lapointe, Itzan Gibbs, and Natalia Gomez. They all had 1 tackle for loss in this game. Campbellsville did end up getting a win back in their next game here, though, to end pool play 1-1. They got a 21-16 win over Siena Heights. Checking out the stats here in that one, this was a great game here offensively here for Campbellsville. Corinne Talkington went 27 for 39 for 243 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and no turnovers. Her leading receiver was going to be Monica Montez with 5 receptions for 75 yards. Alex Odom had 2 receiving touchdowns. That led the team. And Ava Kelly also had a receiving touchdown. Defensively for Campbellsville, Rashaya Minix had a sack, and Alex Odom, always showing her best on both sides of the ball here, had 2 interceptions and 2 flag pulls. Campbellsville definitely a threat to upset someone here in the first round or potentially the second round. So let's go ahead and move on to the next game here. where we had number 9 ranked St. Francis. They're coming into this tournament with a chip on their shoulder. They are ready to prove to everyone that they belong in the top 8. In their first game here, they demolished Cumberland by a score of 40-19. Checking out the stats here, Gianna Reyes had a big-time tournament here, as you'll see. She went 19 for 31 for 357 yards. Wow. 4 passing touchdowns and only 1 turnover there. She did also add 2 rushing touchdowns, bringing her total to 6 on this game here. They had some big receiver stats as well. Haley Weatherspoon had a big weekend. She had 5 receptions for 173 yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. Shout out to Weatherspoon for some baller stats there. You also had Harmony Walker with over 100 yards with a big game. 4 receptions, 102 yards, and a receiving touchdown. Defensively here for St. Francis, they had some big performances. Peyton Priest had 10 flag pulls. That led the team in a tackle for loss. DeKayla Hall had 2 tackles for loss. And Zayjana Pelt had a sack here. Checking out the stats here for Cumberland, Madison Woodard went 37 for 55, 331 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and 1 interception. Definitely not a bad game at all statistically. With big passing stats like that, you already know that there were some big performances for receivers here. Jalea Cole led the way big time. 13 receptions, 120 yards, and a receiving touchdown. He also had Calliana Griggs, 6 receptions, 109 yards, and a receiving touchdown. Definitely a big game there. And then Jessica Young with 8 receptions. That was second on the team, 43 yards, and a receiving touchdown. Defensively for Cumberland, Shania Robinson had an interception, and Ava Hurrigan had a tackle for loss. Looking at the next game here, number 9 ranked St. Francis stayed red hot with a 33-14 win over number 16 ranked Lindsey Wilson. That puts St. Francis at 2-0 heading into bracket play on Friday, April 24th. So that is very interesting there. Let's check out the stats here. Gianna Reyes, she went 17 for 23, 257 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and no turnovers. A very efficient game for her. She went ahead and also added 24 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. For receivers, Haley Weatherspoon obviously keeping it rolling here. 5 receptions, 62 yards, and she led the way with 2 receiving touchdowns. The leader in receiving yards here for St. Francis was Nina Camahill with 3 receptions for 73 yards. You also had Harmony Walker, who had a receiving touchdown. Defensively for St. Francis, Nina Camahill doing it on both sides of the ball. She had an interception and 3 flag pulls. And then DeKayla Hall and Ava Cousins led the way with 9 flag pulls, with Cousins getting 2 tackles for loss and DeKayla Hall getting 1. Checking out the stats here for Lindsey Wilson. Amaya Pablo went 21 for 40, 164 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and an interception. She did also add 141 rushing yards. It's always amazing what kind of stats she can put up in a win or a loss there. For receivers, Jenna Lindsay led the way with 6 receptions for 51 yards. Both of those led the team. And then Mabry Cochran led the way with 1 receiving touchdown, along with Momo Hampton, who also had a receiving touchdown. Next up here, number 16 ranked Lindsey Wilson was not going to go without a win in these pool play games. They smacked down Cumberland 40-18. Amaya Pablo stuffed the stat sheet once again here, just struggling a little bit there with efficiency. She went 18 for 31 for 300 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, and 2 turnovers. She also added 8 carries, 71 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. It was Mabry Cochran all game in this one here. Her connection with Amaya Pablo was absolutely electric. She had 4 receptions. All 4 of those went for touchdowns for 181 yards. Just an amazing performance there for Cochran. Now looking at the defensive stats for Lindsey Wilson, Tyria Tanner led the way with 9 flag pulls and an interception. And then Emerson Gregory also added an interception here for the Lindsey Wilson defense. Checking out the stats for Cumberland, Madison Woodard went 17 for 31, 198 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and no turnovers. Trinity Ryan actually attempted a few passes here. She went 8 for 12, 18 passing yards, and 2 interceptions. Trinity Ryan did add 76 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown on 10 attempts there. And for receivers, Jalea Cole led the way here for the second game in a row. 9 receptions for 92 yards and a receiving touchdown. Calliana Griggs, a decent game here. 4 receptions, 58 yards, and a touchdown. On the other side of the ball, Kaya C.A., sorry if I mispronounced that there, and Jada Starnes both had an interception. Let's go ahead and close out these pool play games from April 23rd. Number 3 ranked Milligan shut out Siena Heights 26-0. And as I mentioned before here, it was Ashton Weirley taking over QB for Milligan here. She went 14 for 25, 146 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, and 3 interceptions in this one. Looking at the receivers here, Krista Quinn led the way with 7 receptions for 45 yards and a receiving touchdown. Lily Rumroll, 2 receptions, 43 yards, and a receiving touchdown. And the senior, Caitlin Quinn, added 2 receiving touchdowns to help out Milligan get this big-time win here to end pool play games 2-0. Defensively for Milligan here, Annabelle Rhodes, 2 interceptions. That's 4 interceptions in 2 games here in the pool play games for the Buffaloes. Parker Bridges, 5 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and an interception. I meant flagpoles there. Abby Lynn Laprice and Chloe Jackson led the way with 6 flagpoles in this one. Oh, and it looks like Lily Rumroll also added an interception as well as that receiving touchdown on offense. Looking briefly at the stats here for Siena Heights, Brianna Saunders went 15 for 30 for 78 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 3 turnovers. She did add 45 rushing yards, though, on 4 attempts. For receivers, Adrian Griffin had 8 receptions for 52 yards. Now, I didn't mention this before. She did also have 2 receiving touchdowns in that first game that she played. So Griffin is definitely the leading target here in these playoffs for Siena Heights. Defensively here for Siena Heights, Gabrielle Cherry, 3 flagpoles, 3 tackles for loss. And Brianna Saunders doing it on both sides. She led the way with 6 flagpoles and an interception. Then we had Mackenzie Pope with 2 interceptions here for Siena Heights. Okay, folks, now that we're all done with those pool play games, we're going to move on to Friday, April 24th for the bracket play games. First up here, we have Campbellsville and Cumberland. They would face off here in the first round. The winner of this one will play number 9 St. Francis in the semifinals. And it was Campbellsville who prevails here with a 20-6 win over Cumberland. Let's look at the stats. Corrine Talkington went 20 for 32, 210 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and only 1 turnover here. Her leading receiver was Alex Odom with 4 receptions for 71 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. Monica Montez also had a 36-yard receiving touchdown to help out Campbellsville in this win. Defensively for Campbellsville, Imani Scott had 3 flagpoles and 1 tackle for loss. Rashaya Minix had 2 flagpoles, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack. And Monica Montez led the way with 6 flagpoles here. Looking at the stats for Cumberland, it looks like they were without Madison Woodard. I'm not sure what happened there, but Trinity Ryan did start at QB here for Cumberland. She went 17 for 24 for 76 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, and an interception. Her leading receiver was Jessica Young with 5 receptions for 42 yards and a receiving touchdown here. And defensively, Avery Conger led the way with 8 flagpoles and a tackle for loss, and Jocelyn Diaz had 4 flagpoles and a sack here. And then Jada Starnes had an interception. Looking at the other first-round game here, Siena Heights and number 16 ranked Lindsey Wilson would be the other first-round matchup. And the winner would play number 3 Milligan in the semifinals. And it was Siena Heights who actually got the massive upset here with a 26-13 win over the number 16 team ranked in the country here. That is absolutely huge. Let's go ahead and check out the stats here. Breonna Sanders went 13 for 24 for 164 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and no turnovers. She did also add 79 rushing yards on 13 attempts. And Adrian Griffin had an electric week here. She had 7 receptions, 88 yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. All of those led the team by a very big margin here. And then looking at the stats for Siena Heights defensively, Kiamora Dunn might have been the player of the game. 13 flag pulls and 2 interceptions to help Siena Heights get this upset win here. Gabrielle Cherry had 6 flag pulls, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack. And then Alexis Falconer and then Adrian Griffin both had a tackle for loss as well here for Siena Heights in this win. Checking out the stats for Lindsey Wilson in what could potentially be their final game of the year if they don't end up going to IMG. Amaya Pablo went 23 for 37 for 190 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions, while also adding 71 rushing yards here. Her leading receivers were going to be Cadence Wormers with 9 receptions for 71 yards. Both of those led the team. And then Mabry Cochran had 2 receiving touchdowns. And then obviously both of those led the team there. Let's move on now to the semifinal games here for this tournament here. It looks like we don't have stats between the St. Francis and Campbellsville game. I do have a score, though. I'm not sure if it's correct, but it looks like number 9 ranked St. Francis barely beat Campbellsville here 20-18. Campbellsville also almost pulled off a huge upset there, but nope, St. Francis is going to be moving on to the NAIA East Conference Championship here after that win. Unfortunately, we don't have stats for that game from either program's website. I don't know what's going on there, but there's just no stats at all for this game, so I'm not sure what happened or how St. Francis was able to win this one. Looking at the game between number 3 Milligan and Siena Heights, Siena Heights' dark horse run did come to a close here with number 3 Milligan shutting them out 21-0. They're going to go ahead and move on to the championship game to face St. Francis. And it was the Milligan defense that really was doing a lot of the heavy lifting in this one. Looking at their defensive stats first here, Michaela Davis, 5 total flag pulls, that led the way here, and a tackle for loss. And then Annabelle Rhodes and Sophia Anderson both added an interception, with Jalise Padilla getting a tackle for loss here. So not some crazy statistical game, just an all-around great group effort here in this win to go ahead and shut out a red-hot Siena Heights team. Offensively here, though, Ashton Weirley went 13 for 22, 130 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and an interception. She did also add a rushing touchdown on 6 yards. The leading receivers were Lily Rumroll with 5 receptions for 64 yards and a receiving touchdown. Krista Quinn had 5 receptions, 46 yards, and a receiving touchdown as well here. Alrighty, folks, it is now finally time to go ahead and see what happened in this NAIA East Conference Championship. And your NAIA East Conference champions are the number 9 ranked St. Francis Cougars after a 32-7 destruction over number 3 ranked Milligan, handing the Buffaloes their very first loss of the 2026 season. And folks, that might have very well have taken Milligan's spot in the finals here for the top 8. That is a huge win for St. Francis here. They will be going on here to the top 8 to play at IMG for the national championship with this win. That is absolutely incredible to see that from a first-year program here. I mean, let's go ahead and take a look at the stats for both teams. Gianna Reyes might have had her finest game of the entire season. She went 33 for 40, 311 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns, and no turnovers, while also adding 34 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Unbelievable game here to secure the championship for St. Francis. Definitely making a very strong case for the conference tournament player of the week here. Now, looking at the receiving stats, it was Harmony Walker leading the way with 7 receptions for 59 yards and a receiving touchdown. You also had Mackenzie Fuez with 7 receptions for 56 yards. Then Ava Cousins and Haley Weatherspoon both added a receiving touchdown as well here. But we weren't done. Madison Myers-Rabitas also got a receiving touchdown. So just a whole big mix here with all sorts of receivers contributing to this win. Defensively here, DeKyla Hall, 5 tackles for loss and a sack. Both of those led the team. And then Haley Weatherspoon and Ava Cousins both added an interception to help secure this win here for number 9 St. Francis. Again, just an unbelievable win for them to be able to sneak into the top 8 and hand Milligan their very first loss of the season this late in the year. I mean, it's heartbreaking for Milligan, obviously, but I mean, you can't help but feel good for St. Francis. That is just amazing for a first-year program. Now let's look at the stats for Milligan. They did not have anything going at all whatsoever offensively. Ashton Weirley, 4 for 8, 55 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, 1 interception. Krista Quinn got in there and threw some passes. She went 4 for 10 for 46 yards, 0 touchdowns, and 1 interception here. Krista Quinn did also catch the 1 receiving touchdown, but honestly, Milligan was just no match for a red-hot St. Francis team with a chip on their shoulder. They were ready to win this one. They wanted to play in Florida bad. And honestly here, I mean, I hate to state the obvious, but, for Milligan to be in better shape here, to be able to make the top 8, they just need to strengthen that schedule next year so that, 1 loss does not dictate their entire season. I mean, we got teams that are in the top 8 that have multiple losses, but they just played tougher teams at the end of the day, so they're going to sneak in over Milligan, and it's tough, man. It is tough. You got to feel bad for them. They've had such an amazing season. The stats are incredible. They've had a ton of freshmen on their team and still were able to dominate this year. But, that's how it goes. Number 9 St. Francis is going to be sneaking in over them. And that's football, man. It's beautiful but ugly at the same time. Kind of depends on how you're looking at it. But definitely congratulations to number 9 St. Francis on this amazing, amazing win here. And as I mentioned before, we're going to go ahead and hand the Playmaker of the Week to Gianna Reyes with an unbelievable performance in all 4 games that she played in this week, help leading St. Francis to their first ever conference championship in their first season as a program. Congratulations again to the Cougars. Alrighty, folks, with the NAIA East Tournament recap all wrapped up here, it's time we go ahead and check out now the 6th ever KCAC Tournament and what happened there. This tournament will consist of 8 teams like usual, those being the number 3 ranked Ottawa Braves, number 6 ranked Kansas Wesleyan, and tied for number 6 ranked Baker. And then we've got Midland, Graceland, William Woods, Southwestern, and Heston rounding us out here. So let's go ahead now and take a look at what happened in the 6th ever 2026 KCAC Tournament. The Braves did not waste any time here. They went ahead and smacked down on Heston 54-0. Let's go ahead and check out the stats here in that one. It looks like Anna Anderson had a fantastic game, almost perfect. She went 18 for 20, 282 yards, 6 passing touchdowns. Unbelievable production there. You also had Kaylee Verhoeven and Marley Spielberg. They also had 1 passing touchdown as well here. For receivers, Marley Spielberg also had 9 receptions, 101 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. All of those led the way. And I'll just go down the line here. Olga Satillo, 3 receptions, 74 yards, 1 receiving touchdown. Tatiana Dos Santos, 5 receptions, 73 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. Alyssa Linkus, 3 receptions, 67 yards, 1 receiving touchdown. And finally here, Jada Barron, 5 receptions, 51 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. An unbelievable performance from the Ottawa receivers, and they had some great QBs throwing the ball to them, so just a great performance all around. And you already know they had some big performances defensively as well here. Let's go ahead and check it out. Jocelyn Garcia led the way with 7 flagpoles and an interception. Sue Kaufman might have had of her game of the year, 6 flagpoles, 4 sacks. And then Jucani Washington, 5 flagpoles, 2 interceptions here for the KCAC Defensive Player of the Year. And then DJ Paris with 2 sacks. And finally here, Allison Doc Olson had an interception, and so did Tati Dos Santos. So an overall big game all around here for the Braves. Let's look at the stats here for Heston. Alexis Pabon went 33 for 49, 256 yards, 0 touchdowns, and yes, 5 turnovers, unfortunately, here. For receivers, her leading receiver by far was going to be Liliana Espinoza with 7 receptions for 47 yards. Now, we had a great game here in the next one between Midland and Graceland. The winner of this one will be playing Ottawa in the next round. And Graceland got a surprising 24-6 win over a senior-heavy Midland squad to advance to the next round. Now let's look at the stats here for Graceland and see who was the main contributors here in this big-time win to advance to the next round. Sierra Flores went 28 for 43 for 185 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and an interception. It was a solid all-around game as far as receivers go. Delaney Mondino and Jada Lammy led the way with 41 receiving yards. Jada Lammy led the team with 9 receptions. Michaela Brown had 2 receiving touchdowns, and Amari Bird had a receiving touchdown as well here. Looking on the defensive side of the ball, Fee Kinville, sorry if I mispronounced that there, had 2 interceptions here to help lead the team here, and Delaney Mondino had an interception as well. Colorado's very own Sadie Lee led the team with 7 flagpoles and a sack, and Kylie Overcamp had a sack as well for Graceland in this win. Checking out the stats for Midland, Lotta Wolf went 25 for 39, 187 yards, 1 passing touchdown, and 3 turnovers. Olivia Dominguez-Millsop led the way here with 6 receptions for 74 yards and potentially her final game at Midland. And then the freshman phenom and utility player of the year finalist, Holiness Hodges, had 8 receptions for 36 yards and a receiving touchdown. Another senior, Alea Livingston, had 6 receptions for 35 yards here. Now looking on the defensive side of the ball here for Midland, looks like Olivia Dominguez-Millsop had an interception, and then Natasia Blaylock had a sack, with Alyssa Butler, another senior, leading the way with 6 flagpoles. Now, real quick here, on that Midland squad, there are some players there that we have been covering since their freshman year over there at Midland. And, I just want to say congratulations on a fantastic career, and thank you for being pioneers of this sport. Your legacy will live on, and again, thank you so much for what you've done here for this sport. Now, keeping things rolling, we're going to check out the game between number 6 ranked Kansas Wesleyan and Southwestern. Southwestern put up a big-time fight here, but Kansas Wesleyan prevailed with a 31-19 win to move on to the next round. Looking at the stats here, Chihiro Owada went 34 for 49, 370 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns, and an interception. For receivers, Janice Washington with potentially her best game of her career so far. 7 receptions, 144 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. Aaliyah Wood led the way with 10 receptions for 79 yards. Yui Watanabe had 2 receiving touchdowns, and Aaliyah Young with another great game. 7 receptions, 60 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. Defensively for Kansas Wesleyan, Kylie Douglas led the way with 7 flagpoles and 2 sacks. You also had Zoe Lucas and Laura Hernandez Sanchez. Both of them had a sack as well here. Now looking at the stats for Southwestern, Kennedy Hayes played a very solid game. She went 14 for 23, 169 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and no turnovers. The senior Viviana Solis, in potentially her final game at Southwestern, she went 8 for 9, 82 yards, and 1 passing touchdown with no turnovers. For receivers, Colorado's very own Mary Jones ending her amazing sophomore year with 5 receptions for 82 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, and then the senior Viviana Solis, 5 receptions, 60 yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. Defensively here for Southwestern, Lilibeth Rico led the way with 11 flagpoles, and Davina Little had an interception. We're going to go ahead and keep things rolling here with the final game from the first round here, where number 6 ranked Baker beat down on William Woods 32-6. Looking at the stats here for Baker, Tara Lorente went 14 for 24, 117 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Looks like she also added a rushing touchdown. For receivers, Melanie Asmar led the way with 8 receptions for 80 yards and a receiving touchdown. You also had Sanaya Waller with 7 receptions, 44 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns here. It was a huge game defensively here for Baker. Natalie Bush with 3 interceptions. You also had Faith Phillips get an interception, Kaylee Phillips with 2 interceptions, and Maziel Peralta, sorry if I mispronounced that there, had an interception as well here. So just a big game all around on defense for Baker. Now checking out the stats for William Woods, they were without their starting QB here, so it was definitely an uphill battle from the beginning. But you had Addie Chillick get a receiving touchdown here. And then on defense, Sam Menard had an interception, and then Olivia Menard also had an interception. Let's look ahead now to the semifinal matchup between number 6 ranked Baker and number 6 ranked Kansas Wesleyan. The battle between the sixes here, where this was supposed to be a close game. The winner of this one was going to be playing the winner between Ottawa and Graceland. But, it looks like Baker just came out and completely destroyed Kansas Wesleyan 40-13. They will be advancing to the next round. Let's go ahead and check out the stats here for Baker in this dominant win here. Tara Lorente went 8 for 15, 179 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and only 1 turnover. As far as rushing the ball goes, it was Sanaya Waller all day. 36 rushing yards with 3 rushing touchdowns, always flashing that ability there as a utility player. Now for receivers, Jalen Harris, 3 receptions, 67 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. You also had Mahogany Simmons get a 66-yard receiving touchdown. Defensively for Baker, Natalie Bush led the way with 9 flagpoles, and Mariah Greenfield got an interception. For Kansas Wesleyan in this one here, Chihiro Wada struggled a little bit with efficiency with that tough Baker defense. She went 31 for 51, 312 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and 1 interception here. Now for receivers, Aaliyah Wood led the way with 11 receptions, 112 yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. You also had Jasmine Whitfield get a receiving touchdown as well here. For Kansas Wesleyan on defense, Aaliyah Wood added an interception. Kylie Douglas had 8 flagpoles, and that led the team. Very disappointing performance there defensively for Kansas Wesleyan. I really thought they were going to compete a lot better here against Baker, but this is definitely not how you want to be going into the Final 8 tournament, but it looks like they are in the Final 8. That's the most important piece, and they're not going to have to play Ottawa or Warner in the first round, so that is absolutely huge. They did avoid disaster, but I think in Chihiro Wada's senior year, as well as many other seniors on this team, you would have liked for them to reach the finals at the very least, but the season's not done, so that is great. Now, speaking of great, we had an electric performance here from Ottawa as they absolutely devastated Graceland in that semifinal game here. Looking at the score, it looks like it was 51-6 in this one. Anna Anderson keeping it rolling. She went 37 for 43, 376 passing yards, 7 passing touchdowns, and 1 interception. Her efficiency is absolutely ridiculous. For the second game in a row, she has more passing touchdowns than incompletions. I mean, that is just absurd. Now looking at the stats here, Olga Sotillo leading the way, the freshman phenom, 12 receptions, 133 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. You also had Jada Bayron and Alyssa Linkus get a receiving touchdown. Marley Spielberg, 7 receptions, 51 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. And finally, Tatiana Dos Santos with 5 receptions, 48 yards, and a receiving touchdown. Looking at the defensive stats here for the Braves, DJ Paris led the way with 8 flagpoles and a sack. And then Bethany Uribe, Tatiana Dos Santos, and the Defensive Player of the Year in the KCAC, Jucani Washington, also had 1 interception each in this one to go ahead and move on to play Baker in the KCAC Championship. Ottawa is looking for their 6th in a row, folks. Alrighty, folks, it is finally time to go ahead and see what happened in the 2026 KCAC Tournament Championship between Ottawa and Baker. This was an absolutely electric matchup that went all the way down to the final drive of the game to see who won. Ottawa came out to a 14-6 lead at the half. Baker chipped into that lead in the third quarter to make it 14-12, and then Ottawa would go ahead and take a 20-12 lead. Baker was not done there, though. They got a touchdown and the extra point to make it 20-20, but Ottawa, they just said, not today. They went ahead and took home their 6th KCAC Tournament Championship. They beat Baker 26-20 in this game. I mean, I know I should not be surprised at this point. Ottawa never gives up in any game they've ever been in. I mean, look at the game earlier this year against Kaiser. They came back and won that one. And then in this game, you had Baker knocking on the door all game, but they just could not care less. They stayed poised, won the game 26-20 with some electric performances on both sides of the ball. And, I was watching it live while I was at work. I saw Casey Hart jump up and absolutely rip a ball out of a receiver's hands for a game-winning interception to end the game. I mean, it's stuff like that a lot of teams just don't have, Ottawa always finds a way. They really are an amazing team to watch. Looking at the stats here, Anna Anderson, 29 for 42, 183 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns, and 1 interception. She also added 52 rushing yards. For receivers, Olga Sotillo, no surprise here, led the way with 10 receptions, 67 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. And you also had the senior Alyssa Linkus with the receiving touchdown, and Tatiana Dos Santos got in there with the receiving touchdown as well. Looking at the defensive stats for Ottawa, Jucani Washington led the way with 7 flag pulls. Casey Hart had that clutch interception, and Tatiana Dos Santos got in there with an interception as well. I think that's 1 interception in each game that she played in for Dos Santos. I could be wrong there, but that's amazing job on both sides of the ball there. Looking at the stats here for Baker in this heartbreaker, they went 22 for 34 for Tara Lorente, 1 passing touchdown and 2 interceptions. Kaylee Phillips went 4 for 5 for 31 yards and a passing touchdown. Sanaya Waller added a rushing touchdown too. Now looking at receivers, Sanaya Waller was the leading receiver, 14 receptions, 97 yards. You also had Kaylee Phillips get a receiving touchdown, and Tara Lorente had a 1-yard receiving touchdown as well. Because Coach Perez is always getting crafty with how he's scoring points. Love to see that there. Looking at the defensive side of the ball here for Baker, Natalie Bush with an amazing KCAC tournament. She led the team with 8 flag pulls and a tackle for loss. Kenya Arias had a sack and 6 flag pulls. And then Kaylee Phillips had an interception. So Kaylee Phillips, passing touchdown, receiving touchdown, and an interception, doing whatever she possibly could to try and get Baker to win this game. But folks, it's all good for Baker. Don't feel too bad for them. They're still going to be playing in the top 8 here to play for the national championship in Florida in about a week here. So that's very exciting. They're going to be just fine. This team has plenty of talent. They have a chip on their shoulder. They made a big dent in a lot of different teams last year at the tournament. And they have a lot of the same returning talent, so it's going to be a lot of the same in this tournament here. They can definitely upset any of these teams across the board. So Baker is in great shape. As far as Ottawa goes, they're the KCAC Tournament champions for the 6th year in a row. That is absolutely amazing. They will have the number 2 seed heading into the tournament right there behind Warner. Ottawa will be playing St. Thomas in the first round. I got to see those 2 teams play in pool play games for the national tournament back in 2024. It was a great game, a great matchup between 2 teams with a lot of history. Obviously, Ottawa is looking for their 6th straight national championship here with a new quarterback in Anna Anderson. And speaking of Anna Anderson, she is going to be your 2026 KCAC Tournament Playmaker of the Week. After just an unbelievable performance, rushing the ball, passing the ball, her efficiency was just something we don't see from very many quarterbacks whatsoever. So yeah, Anna Anderson, your 2026 KCAC Tournament Playmaker of the Week. Alrighty, folks, that is going to do it here for the recap of the NAIA East and the KCAC tournaments. Congratulations to the teams that will be moving on to the Final 8 to compete for the National Championship in Florida. And congratulations to all of the other teams on another great season. It was a real pleasure getting to be able to cover what happened for y'all this year. This is Gino with the Playmakers Corner podcast, and I will see you all for the NAIA National Tournament recaps very soon. Peace out.
All right, now let's go ahead and recap the first ever, at least the first official ever, United East Conference flag football tournament. I know they had a championship last year, but I don't think that was official, so this is considered the inaugural one here, and this is how the setup was for this tournament. So it was a one-day tournament. They invited the top 4 teams in the conference, and that was based off of conference standings and whatnot, and just putting this out there in case anybody cared. But if 2 teams had the same record, they look at the head-to-head results. After that, they look at results against conference opponents in descending order, and then there's point differential that was taken in consideration, and that was all in that order. And those are the first couple. They went in depth, like it's almost 8, 7. I don't know, a couple of tiebreakers deep here, but I don't think they really had to go that deep. But just put that out there in case anyone was curious. And so here was how it was going to be set up. 4 teams. You had each team, at most playing 2 games, including the championship there. And this is kind of how it looked like. So on one side of the bracket, you had number 1 Gallaudet, who did win it all last season and was undefeated in the regular season against conference play, versus number 4 Cedar Crest College. And then the winner of that would play the winner of the other semifinal, which was number 2 Penn State Harrisburg, who would go ahead and play number 3 Cairn University. Now, I do have the stats for all of these games, except for some reason, the Penn State Harrisburg versus Cairn game, I don't know why. There was no box score for that. I also don't know why I was not able to watch it. But, it is what it is. We're going to recap what we know. So let's actually go ahead and start on the Gallaudet side here. Gallaudet taking on Cedar Crest, and this one really wasn't super close. Gallaudet came out to kind of a slow start here, but at the end of the third quarter, they were up 20-0. Cedar Crest would score in the fourth here. I mean, at half, it was 6-0. But like I said, just a slow start for Gallaudet. I mean, this wasn't really a team that they struggled too much against. And so they go ahead and beat them 27-6 to move on to the championship. Here are the stats for that game. Gianna Visco, like I said, struggled early on. 21 of 35, 177 yards, 2 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Also had 67 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. So she did score, or had a hand in scoring all of their touchdowns. But like I said, 3 turnovers is never a good thing, though, especially in a playoff or postseason game, but still got it done. Receiving-wise, Jada Zaremka led with 6 receptions for 61 yards and a touchdown. Tiana Steriev was right behind her, though, with 4 for 47 and a touchdown. Satrine Loomer had 6 for 47, and Tamara Tedavosian had 4 for 35, which pretty much rounded out that Gallaudet receiving core. Defensively, it was Tedavosian who had 7 flag pulls, which led the team, but you had Satrine Loomer who had 2 interceptions, and then as well as Evangeline Diaz who had 2 interceptions as well, and then it looks like Hadassah Schuyler had a sack. But this Gallaudet defense was holding it down for Cedar Crest as the offense was kind of figuring it out, settling in, right? But I really got to give a lot of credit to this defense, who pretty much started and finished the game for Gallaudet, which is why playmaker of the game for this one, at least, has to be Satrine Loomer. 6 receptions, 47 receiving yards, 5 flag pulls, 2 interceptions, and one of those was a pick 6 to start I want to say to start the third quarter. Let me double check that. Yeah, I want to say to start the third quarter, that was a pick six there. That will kind of get them rolling a little bit more here and would make this officially a 2-score game for the majority of the second half. So there you go. Now, let's go ahead and look at Cedar Crest here. Not a bad year. I believe, if I'm correct here, that this is their first year as a program. Would ironically finish 6-7 in their first year, but still having postseason experience, you cannot discredit that at all. That is going to be valuable for those who return next season. And now that I'm actually looking at their schedule here, I want to say they were the team that played Gallaudet the closest in United East regular season play here. They only lost to them 0-15 just a couple weeks ago. So, going into this one, obviously some high hopes, and it was obvious that they had their number defensively. They picked off Visco, who is a very good quarterback, over there 3 times. Now, when you pick somebody off 3 times, you probably hope for maybe more than 1 score in a game. But, it is what it is. You live and you learn. Let's start with the defensive side of the ball, though. Gigi Martin led with 8 flagpoles. You had an interception from Zane Pollard, and then 2 interceptions from Ginger Kurdock. But like I said, defensively wasn't really the issue here. You got to remember, they really only allowed 3 touchdowns, because one of those was a pick 6 thrown by your offense, who struggled. They played 2 different quarterbacks. Lamaya Clemens, 7 of 18, 69 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. And Elise Rios, 4 of 9, 5 yards, 2 interceptions. I mean, you just can't be turning over the ball that much in a postseason game and really expect to win here. And then receiving-wise, Kurdock led with 3 receptions for 36 and a touchdown. Rios right behind her with 3 for 32 as well. But unfortunately, just falling short to Gallaudet. Not even that bad of a game here. Like I said, it's just one of those things where defensively it was obvious they were familiar with some of the things that Gallaudet was going to do. That's why they held them to 6 really throughout most of this game, right? Until that pick 6 at the end, but I don't really count that, right? Offensively, some work to be put in for sure. And I believe they do or should be returning most of these players. It doesn't look like any of them are seniors. So, except for Erica Butler, who's listed at quarterback, but she did not play at quarterback either this game or for a minute, to be honest with you. So, future is definitely bright for Cedar Crest. Unfortunately, this is a loss that they're going to have to take on the chin moving forward here, as Gallaudet goes ahead and punches their ticket to another conference championship, the first official one here, with a 27-6 win. Now let's move on to the other semifinal, which, by the way, shout out Cairn University, was able to find the box score from that one here. So excited to be able to share that and just give more insight about what happened in this game, because this was an instant classic here. So right off the bat, it looks like that Penn State Harrisburg would score, I want to say either late in the first or early in the second, would not get the PAT, but they would go up early in this playoff game to go up 6-0. Not soon after that, though, Desiree Bright would end up finding Abigail Strange to tie this thing up for Cairn to make it 6-6. Not too far following that, I believe Penn State Harrisburg was able to get a score here, but not the PAT, so it stays at 7-12. And then right before half, it looks like that Penn State Harrisburg was able to score one more time. Well, this is where the play-by-play gets messed up here, but both teams are actually able to score one more time right before the half ended, and so Cairn would be trailing Penn State Harrisburg 13-19 in a very explosive, 14-19 in a very explosive second quarter. I think all those scores came in the second quarter. Now, after that, not too much would happen in the third quarter, a very quiet third quarter, until we get to the beginning of the fourth here, where, things get pretty interesting here. So, I think it's 3rd and goal for Cairn, who is trying to cut into this lead, probably trying to tie this game and then potentially take the lead here. Desiree Bright is intercepted by Penn State Harrisburg's NAIA King, who goes ahead and picks this one off to end a red zone look for Karen. And then this is really where things begin to go ahead and turn, as NAIA King will then go ahead and rush for a 62-yard touchdown to the house at 11:40, and also get the PAT here, which would be good to go ahead and extend this Penn State Harrisburg lead from a one-score game, like I said, 19-14, to now a two-score game here. And I want to say they went for two here on that pass attempt, which would go ahead and extend the lead right there for Harrisburg. And so that would be a massive, massive shift in this game here. I mean, there'd still be 10 minutes, but Karen would need to score and then stop, Penn State Harrisburg from scoring and then score again all in that time. But unfortunately for them, they just could not get going here as this Penn State defense really heated up down the stretch. They would get a late score here, but like I said, wouldn't matter as much. It was just too little too late here, as Penn State Harrisburg takes down Karen 27-21 in an absolute thriller to go ahead and punch their ticket to the conference championship. Looking at the stats here, NAIA King, 187 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, 82 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Sensational performance. That's why she's your playmaker of the game right there. And then receiving-wise, Jordan Carpenter was the lead receiver, 6 receptions, 84 yards, 2 touchdowns. Mila Guest, 4 for 39. Nira Perez, 2 for 20, as well as Janae Thompson, 2 for 20, which pretty much led your receiving group. Defensively, Perez led with 10 flagpoles here. Grace Kurtz had 2 sacks, and then NAIA King obviously had that big-time interception that ended up setting up the rushing touchdown that would put the dagger into Karen. For Karen here, not even a bad stat line on paper for Desiree Bright. 37 of 55, 304 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. Did take 3 sacks here, but other than that, pretty efficient here. Claire Tilvowski here, Tylafsky here was their lead receiver with 7 receptions, 93 yards and a touchdown, followed by Juliana Condurso, 8 for 71 and a touchdown, and Katie Moreau, 11 for 53. Abigail Strange also had 6 receptions for 37 yards and a touchdown, as well as Olivia Logan having 5 receptions for 40 receiving yards here. Offensively, not too bad. They were driving up and down. I mean, they had a chance to take the lead in the fourth quarter, but it's crazy what one interception can do, one turnover late can do, and just absolutely change the tides of that game here. And then they just took too long to score and then get the ball back, right? And those things happen. I mean, this Karen team has legitimately gotten better every single week here. I mean, this is their first year, I believe, and they're going to finish the season 4-6 here. Their 4 wins against Lancaster Bible, Keystone again, and Cedar Crest. But they did play Penn State Harrisburg close in this game, as well as in the regular season. Same with Cedar Crest. Same with Gallaudet. I mean, 7-19, which was not bad at all. Give them another year, and I think the future is really bright. I mean, just looking at this roster here, losing Abigail Strange will be tough for sure. She's a senior, but other than that, I mean, Delaney Hollenbeck is a senior as well. It looks like they should be returning everyone, so you have a spot to work off of, to kind of begin, and I don't think you could be too disappointed with how the season went, with how you played ultimately, a team that is going to the conference championship. I think if you are Karen, you could be happy with that, even though it's a disappointing, result. You gave it a good go. Right, offensively, I was very impressed by Desiree Bright. I thought she came out, and they came out swinging as a team. Not just her, but the entire team came out swinging. Did not go down, fought to the end. Unfortunately, it just did not quite go their way this year. So excited to see what they do next year for sure. But for now, the 2026 United East Conference Championship is set here. Predicted by most, but we got Penn State Harrisburg facing off with Gallaudet. Now let's go ahead and talk about it. These two teams have been battling out all season. I think they had a couple other matchups here, and Gallaudet has won them all, but they have become increasingly closer every time they've played. Every time they played, it's become a little bit closer here, and so that's definitely worth noting. For Gallaudet, not exactly an undefeated season going into this one. They did lose to, I want to say, Ferrum by a point or a score, so there's that. Penn State Harrisburg, I think the only team they lost to was the Gallaudet, if I'm being honest. And yeah, that's true. Lost to them 20-34, and then once more 19-38. So actually opposite. It got a little bit not as close, but regardless, these two teams are familiar with each other going into this game, and so you kind of expected this one to maybe be a little bit lower scoring than they have been in the past between these two squads. It is their third matchup here, and I believe both of them pretty much got to see the other one play already. So let's just go ahead and hop right into it. Like I said, started out pretty slow here. Nothing went on in the first quarter. Penn State Harrisburg would get on the board in the second and third while holding Gallaudet to 0 thanks to 2 NAIA King passing touchdowns to Morgan Cruz and Janae Thompson. After that, though, Gallaudet would go ahead and find a score here. Gianna Visco finding her setter, Jada Zaremka, to cut into the lead to make it 12-7 in the fourth quarter with 10 minutes left here. Plenty of time. But this Penn State Harrisburg team stood strong here and would not allow them to score for the rest of the game, as they got a lot of pressure here on Visco, just disrupting the whole rhythm of that offense. And then offensively for Penn State Harrisburg, they would not be able to score again, but they would be able to sustain just enough drives to use up the rest of the clock. And so in a absolute upset here and thriller, Penn State Harrisburg becomes your first ever United East Conference champions in women's college flag football over Gallaudet with a score of 12-7. Like I said, both teams were very familiar with each other. At the end, it came down to Penn State Harrisburg making some plays on offense here and then holding this Gallaudet defense pretty much until the end as far as scoring went. Now let's go ahead and look at the stats. Let's start with Gallaudet. For Gianna Visco, not even that bad of a game. Only took that one sack, which was in the fourth quarter, mind you, which is tough, right? But only had one other interception here. 34-47, 309 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Also had 16 rushing yards there. They just could not score when it mattered, which was unfortunate because it does look like they're able to move up and down here. At least not just go 3 and out over and over and over again, but be able to get some production, but just could not get more than 1 touchdown on the board. Receiving wise, Citrine Loomer had herself a game, 18 receptions, 142 yards. Jada Zaremka, 11 for 121 and a touchdown. You also had Tiana Steriev, 3 for 33, and Tamara Tadevosian with 2 for 13 here. And I mean, at the end, just not enough, as they just could not score. They were literally a touchdown away from winning it all, but I mean, just not enough here. Like I said, still very productive, still like a performance you could look at and probably in an alternate universe be proud of if you won with that stat line, but unfortunately, you know, it just is what it is for now. Defensively for Gallaudet, while 2 scores isn't ideal, that's not bad at all. You know, if you allow a team to only score 12 points, you would hope that your offense could outscore them and score more than 12 points. And today, it just wasn't that day. Citrine Loomer led the team with 12 flag pulls here. Shaylin Johnson had an interception, but just not enough, as Penn State Harrisburg would go ahead and squeak this one out. And let's go ahead and look at this team here, your conference champions here in the United East. NAIA King had herself a day scoring against this Gallaudet offense in a matchup that you knew was going to be close and that you knew that you needed to take all the opportunities there were to score, and she was very, very efficient here. 30 of 38, only 8 incompletions, 218 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. Did throw a pick though, but added on another 40 rushing yards, as she was efficient enough, probably the most efficient she's ever been against Gallaudet, and it mattered most here in this conference championship. Looking at her receivers, I mean, she spread out the ball very well. Mila Guest, 5 for 54. Nira Perez, 8 for 52. Jordan Carpenter, 8 for 44. Morgan Cruz, 4 for 40 and a touchdown. Janae Thompson, 4 for 29 and a touchdown. That is 5 players with at least 4 receptions, which is pretty crazy when you think about it there. That's just a very even distributing and passing from NAIA King here, who, by the way, is your playmaker of the game and one of your playmakers of the week here. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But looking at the defense, Bianca Williams played well, 10 flag pulls and a sack. Nira Perez, an interception here. Janae Thompson, 8 flag pulls. I want to say, if I am not mistaken, Bianca Williams would actually win tournament MVP for her defensive efforts in this one. And honestly, I respect it. I see it. She had a great game versus Karen as well, which was another close game. But for me, I mean, I could pick a playmaker of the week out of every conference championship that I get to cover, right? Same with Kodey and Gino. They're going to pick their playmaker of the weeks as well from the tournament that they get to cover. And for me personally, I really felt like NAIA King did her thing in both of these games here, especially knowing how that Karen game went, where she got that interception and then ripped off a 60-yard rushing touchdown. Those are the things of legend right there, finding a way to go ahead and get it done, because if they were able to score, if she allowed that pass, then that would be a way different game. Karen would be up by a score. Penn State would not be up by 2 scores. That is a massive swing in things. And for me, I just cannot forget that. That's obviously huge. And then even in this Gallaudet game, I mean, she threw 2 of those touchdowns to 2 different receivers. And like I said, did a good job spreading out the football and not allowing Gallaudet to really key in on a player that caused this team to struggle. And, this Penn State Harrisburg offense, they moved along and they won the matchups they needed to win, including this one over Gallaudet, 12-7 for the first official United East Conference Championship. And so I gotta give my playmaker of the week out of the United East to NAIA King of Penn State Harrisburg. Congrats to them. They had an excellent season here. And honestly, I really do look forward to talking about them a little bit more in the offseason. I guess being really short here, looking at what they have going on. Let's look at Gallaudet here. It looks like they should be returning most of the roster. I don't think anyone will be graduating. If anyone is not on the roster, that just means that, they decided not to play, or they may be transferred, or what have you. I don't know. But it does not look like they have a single senior on this roster. So Gallaudet will be back, and that is kind of scary to think about. Then you have Penn State Harrisburg here, 11-2 in their first season. NAIA King, your playmaker of the week, and has consistently been productive, is only a freshman. Bianca Williams, your MVP of this tournament, is only a freshman as well. Jordan Carpenter is a grad student, so that is tough. Maybe one more year, maybe not. We'll see. Mila Guest, though, is a freshman. Janae Thompson is a freshman. Grace Kurtz is a freshman, just to name a couple of names there. I mean, they will also be back, and so Jordan Carpenter will be a tough loss here if she does end up graduating by this time next year, but you can expect this Penn State Harrisburg to continue to reload, as it looks like we are going to have a budding rivalry with Gallaudet, and so that's going to be a fun one to look out for moving forward. But there you go there. That is the end of your United East Conference Tournament recap here. Penn State Harrisburg is your United East Conference champions over Gallaudet by a score of 12-7. All right, let's talk about the Empire 8. I believe this is their first ever conference championship, at least first ever official conference championship that is here. And here's the setup. You have your top 4 teams in the conference decided by conference play. Obviously, you have some tiebreakers here and there, but I don't think they really needed to do too many of that. And so it goes like this. Yeah, Geneseo, who was the number 1 seed at 12-4 overall, 7-1 in conference. Right behind them was Brockport, who did not have the head-to-head, 6-2 in conference, but was 7-3 overall. And then you have Hartwick College at 3, who was 4-6 on the year, and Elmira, who was 5-5. But both teams were 3-5 in Empire 8 play here. And I believe Hartwick had the head-to-head, if I was not mistaken. So that's how that worked out here. You had number 1 Geneseo playing number 4 Elmira. You had number 2 Brockport playing number 3 Hartwick here. And whoever was the highest seed pretty much hosted all the way through, so there was a chance that, Geneseo would be able to host throughout the rest of this tournament here at home. At least as long as they won. Obviously, there was no neutral site location for that. And so let's go ahead and hop into it. Let's start with Brockport. Number 2 Brockport would go ahead and play number 3 Hartwick here. And this was just not really a close game at half. It was 20-6. And then Brockport outscoring Hartwick 26-12 in the second half to win this one by a whopping 47-18 to punch their ticket to the first ever Empire 8 Conference Championship for flag football. Let's look at the stats here for Brockport here. Megan Gerber had herself a game, 16 of 34, 207 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns, and then 168 rushing yards and a touchdown on 18 carries. Just being the absolute engine for a Brockport team here that could really find, no problems as they continue to score and spread out the football while doing that. Jelani Harper was their lead receiver, 8 receptions, 123 yards, 2 touchdowns, followed by Addie Vandewater, 6 for 80 and 2 touchdowns. Lauren Gundra had 3 for 56 and a touchdown. And then you had Ava, I think it's Petlick, Caitlin Haw, and Victoria Slide Butts here, who each had a reception. But like I said, spreading out the football pretty well as this Brockport offense really powered this team to the conference championship. Defensively, not bad either here. Kimberly Jefferson led with 9 flagpoles here. Right behind her, though, was Addie Vandewater, who had 8 flagpoles and an interception. And then Lauren Condra had an interception as well, as this offense was popping off. And defensively, not too bad either. I mean, did allow a touchdown in every quarter outside of the first. But when your offense is playing the way they can, you really cannot complain. Looking at Hartwick here, unfortunately, their season will go ahead and end right here. I believe this was their first year ever. First year ever playing, and so they will fall to 4-7 in their inaugural year. But looking at the stats, Audra Dahl, 154 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, just a couple turnovers too many here, because they were able to pass and run the ball relatively well here. 162 rushing yards on the ground. Dahl had 86 of those, followed by Ann Stanovich, who had 25 and a touchdown, and Ellie Kalbach, who had 2 rushes for 24 yards. Receiving wise, Zoe Sullivan led with 5 for 66 and a touchdown, followed by Bailey McCoy, who had 7 for 42 and a touchdown. And then you had Ellie Kalbach and Ann Stanovich and Brooke Sands with 2 receptions each there. But like I said, offensively just could not keep up with this Brockport offense here. Defensively struggled. Lexi Cheeseman, Ellie Kalbach each had 8 flagpoles each, but no sacks, no turnovers, as Brockport on the back of Megan Gerber and this powerful offense goes ahead and beats Hartwick 47-18 to punch their ticket to the next round here and the conference championship. And then you go ahead and you have Hartwick here, who, like I said, didn't have a bad team. That postseason experience is going to matter. They did score 18, but defensively, just not enough there to stop this Brockport team. Looking at the roster, I don't believe they have too many seniors. Ellie Kalbach is a senior, which is tough. I'm not going to lie. Contributed on both sides of the ball here. Brooke Sands is a senior as well. But other than that, you do return pretty much everyone else. Most of your skill players, most of your offense, defense. Audra Dahl will be coming back. Bailey McCoy, Lexi Cheeseman, just to name off a few here. You do have players to work off of. And, getting to a playoff spot and scoring and competing is never a bad thing. And so shout out Hartwick here, but unfortunately for now, their season will end as they fall to Brockport 47-18. Now on the other semifinal, we had number 1 Geneseo playing number 4 Elmira. In the regular season, they met twice here, and it really wasn't that close. Geneseo would beat Elmira on March 27th, 33-13, and then more recently played them in their last game of the season and beat them 26-8. So really no disrespect, obviously, but really there was no indication score-wise before that this could have been like a super close game, but that's what makes the playoffs special, as anything could happen. And so let's go ahead and hop into it. Starting in the first half here, it looked like Geneseo had it. They're up 26-12 here. Elmira did score 12 in the second quarter to end that half relatively strong here, but already down by 2 scores. It looked like Geneseo was in control and that there was not going to be any issues. And really all you had to do from here on out was just stroll into the second half. If they score, you score, or nobody scores and you win. But instead, this is what ended up happening. So let's set the stage. 26-12 here. Elmira has the ball coming out of the third quarter, and they come out storming here as their quarterback, Hannah Smith, finds a Mariona Dixon here, as well as Kylie Hook with 2 straight completions before hitting Dixon back on a 30-yard reception, and then one more time right after that for a touchdown to go ahead and cut into this lead, making it 26-18. On the 2-point conversion, Smith goes ahead and gets it, and so now all of a sudden it is 26-20, now a 1-score game, just like that. Now, after that, Elmira would quickly force a Geneseo punt here. I don't think they won 3 and out. I think they maybe got a first and then punted it. And then they would get a nice return, 43 yards on that. But unfortunately, were not able to potentially score to tie the game or even take the lead. And they would turn it over on downs in the red zone. Still getting into the red zone, a nice trip, a nice drive for this Elmira squad led by Hannah Smith. But unfortunately, just coming up a little bit short here. But the Elmira defense would respond with yet another stop to keep this game within 6 points, and that was the chance that they would need here early in the fourth quarter. Hannah Smith finds Dixon once again for a second touchdown of the half, and that would tie this one up here at 26-26. Following that, the Elmira defense gets yet another stop here, stonewalling this Geneseo offense here, and the Soaring Eagles offense on fire goes ahead and puts together a 70-yard drive in under 2 minutes, led by Hannah Smith, who found multiple receivers here, completing passes to Hook, Ingber, Dixon, and Nyla Capon, before ultimately throwing a touchdown to Kylie Hook to go ahead and win the game. A 10-yard touchdown here. Elmira would go for 2 and would get it to get the 8-point lead on the final drive of the game for Elmira's offense of the game. And then defensively, once again, Elmira's defense, 3 straight stops. Actually, not just 3 straight stops, but a complete shutout of the second half would go ahead and upset Geneseo, keeping them out of the red zone as Elmira wins 34-26, eliminating the number 1 seed in the conference championship. And I had to do a little bit of research here, but I believe for the first time ever in women's college flag football history, you have the last seed beating the 1 seed in a conference championship here. Elmira making history here as they take down Geneseo in an upset of the century, the biggest upset on the East Coast since Hope International beat St. Thomas in week 1 of this season. Elmira comes out on top 34-26 to punch their ticket to the Empire 8 Conference Championship. Now, before we talk about the conference championship, let's get into the stats here. Let's start with Geneseo. Ella Koopman, 21 of 29, 258 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, 3 sacks, 111 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. I mean, on paper, 4 total touchdowns in the first half is not bad. It just looks really bad when you don't do anything else after that here, as this Geneseo offense they just were shocked and stonewalled in that second half here and could not get anything going here despite these early numbers here. Karina Dunn was their lead receiver, 7 receptions, 91 yards and a touchdown. Natalia DePalma, 3 for 68 and a touchdown. Kenna McKenzie, 6 for 63, and Abigail Urich, 5 for 31 there. Defensively, Fiorina Daniel led with 9 flag pulls here. Jessica Chase had 2 sacks, but they did not record a single interception on Elmira, which is tough here. Now for Elmira, Hannah Smith, have yourself a day. 354 passing yards on 35 of 57 passing, 5 passing touchdowns, no interceptions. Did take 2 sacks here, but not bad at all. But you can't talk about this Elmira offense without talking about Amariona Dixon, who led the team in everything receiving. 15 receptions, 178 receiving yards, 4 receiving touchdowns here. Right behind her was Faith Ingber, 7 for 78, Kylie Hook, 9 for 70 and a touchdown, and Nyla Capon, 4 for 20 here, as Hannah Smith did a good job spreading out the football, but Dixon, I mean, it felt like when they needed a play, she gave you one, and that was absolutely huge as they would scrap their way back into it. Defensively, Jenica Jones had 13 flag pulls and 2 sacks, which was huge. Dixon right behind her with 9 flag pulls and an interception, which is why she's your playmaker of the game of this one. Just an absolutely great performance from her. And then Nyla Capon had an interception, as well as Philly Watson with a sack. As this Elmira team just got, honestly, maybe the biggest upset of the postseason so far, 34-26 over Geneseo, as they now face Brockport in the conference championship. For Geneseo, on the other hand, I mean, not a bad season. Unfortunately, they just end at 12-5. I mean, their losses, lost to Roberts Wesleyan twice. The first time was close, second time not as much. Lost to Hartwick by 7. While I'm looking at this, I think that was their only Empire 8 loss here, which was a 7-point loss to Hartwick. They beat Brockport, Sage, St. Joseph's, Long Island, Westbury, Villa Maria. They would lose to Villa Maria again, though, later, 6-26, as that would be their other loss. And then they lose to Elmira in a close one, 26-34, where they just did not have a good second half. And so, where to go from here if you're Geneseo? I mean, it's still a pretty successful season when you take a full step back and look at it. And I know for a lot of those players and coaches, it is probably really hard to take a full step back this soon and look at it when it felt like you could have went all the way and you were right there and just couldn't quite finish here. But, I mean, realistically, this was a good season for them. Especially because I believe this was their first official year, or I guess they played last year as well. But I would consider this probably their first official year. And, I mean, they didn't play bad. You know, they didn't. It's just unfortunate how it all went down, and sometimes that's just how the game of football goes. And so, I mean, looking at this, Megan Howard, she's a senior. Riley Griffin, another senior for you. Abigail Ulrich is tough as well. That's another senior that will be gone. And then I want to say that is pretty much it. They returned everyone else here, which is never a bad thing. They returned their quarterback, which is huge. She had her moments, right? They returned the majority of this team, which is all obviously huge. They'll be back. You know, got to give them some time. Really interested to see how much they get better going into next year, how they improve. Maybe some recruits they could bring in could change the tides a little bit here. But, I mean, they're right there. You know, they had to play one more complete half, and they just didn't. And Elmira, you know, they're going to be in their spot because of it. Now, let's go ahead and talk about that finally. Brockport taking on Elmira College here. That is a battle of number 2 versus number 4. Brockport hosting this Empire 8 championship game. And this would be a good one, so let's just hop right into it. In the first quarter, Elmira picks up where they left off here, getting on the board early. First with a Hannah Smith throw to Kylie Hook for a touchdown, as well as a Hannah Smith rushing touchdown to make it 12-0 early on here in the first quarter. Following that, early in the second quarter, about 10:30 here, Hannah Smith will throw a pass, but it would be intercepted by Brockport's and Addie Vandewater, who returns this one to the house to put Brockport on the board 12-6. Now, not too much would happen more in the second, but late in the second, with about less than a minute left here, a Lauren Kundra interception would set up one last Brockport drive of the half, and Megan Gerber would pass this one for a touchdown and also get the PAT to give Brockport the slim, yet still 13-12 lead at half, as both teams going back and forth here, looking like this game will be decided by the second half here. Now going into the third quarter, here is a defining moment that would happen. Elmira was going to go for two after scoring here, and Gerber would intercept this pass and return it to give Brockport not the lead, but a 2-point basically safety at that point instead, which would prevent that score from being extended at that point, which was absolutely massive in that game. Following that, a couple more touchdowns would be exchanged in the fourth quarter, but once again, Brockport would outshoot Elmira, emerging victorious in a very close game here in this one, winning it just slightly, 36-31 here. I don't know if that 2-point conversion would have changed a whole bunch. It felt like maybe that was more of a momentum shift. I mean, shout out Elmira, they continued to fight here, but at the end, Brockport, they got just a couple more big plays that really fed into that confidence there, and that is why they're able to go ahead and become your Empire 8 Conference champions. Let's go ahead and look at the stats, though, for this. Let's start with Elmira here. Hannah Smith, 258 yards, 1 touchdown, but 5 interceptions here. A lot of interceptions thrown in this game. A lot of the scoring did come on the ground for Elmira here, because Hannah Smith also had 116 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. Nyla Capon adding on another rushing touchdown. Receiving-wise, Faith Ingber, 7 for 107. Kylie Hook, 8 for 95 and 30. Kylie Hook, 8 receptions for 95 yards and a receiving touchdown. And then Amariona Dixon, only 2 receptions for 37 yards here, as Brockport really keyed in on her, it looks like, in this game. Defensively, I mean, really not a lot of defense played by both teams, but Elmira, 13 flag pulls by Faith Ingber, and they also had 4 interceptions, 2 by Kylie Hook, 2 by Amariona Dixon, so they had opportunities, but you also can't be, turning over the ball on offense 5 times and expecting to win a game. That is just, it's a lot of turnovers, and technically they did lose the turnover battle here, even though Brockport had a decent amount of turnovers as well. Let's go ahead and look at Brockport, though. Megan Gerber, 127 passing yards on 14 of 32, 3 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, but a whopping 260 rushing yards and rushing touchdown on 33 attempts here, as they just put the ball literally in her hands, and she found a way to get it done. 4 touchdowns to 4 turnovers is not as bad as 4 touchdowns to 5 turnovers, and that's what it comes down to, turnovers in this game. And then receiving-wise for Brockport, Addie Vandewater, 4 for 35 and a touchdown. Caitlin Ha, 3 for 28 and a touchdown. And Trelawney Harper, 4 for 28 and a touchdown there. Lauren Kundra, Ava, I think it's Pitlick, and Ariana Kennedy each had a reception as well for Brockport. Defensively, like I said, not a lot of defense being played, but they did win the turnover battle here. Andy Vandewater, 8 flag pulls, 2 interceptions. Ava, I think it's Lay, had 2 interceptions as well as Lauren Kundra with an interception. Kimberly Jefferson had a sack for this team. At the end of the day, this was going to be a close game. Both teams coming into this one hot here. It came down to the turnovers here. Simply put, Brockport had 1 less turnover than Elmira, and that does end up mattering, unfortunately, here. But for Brockport, I believe If I am not mistaken, I want to say this is their first year. In their first year, 9-3, and your first ever Empire 8 conference champions with this 36-31 win over Elmira. And I mean, just looking at this Brockport team here, you do have a couple of seniors, Ava Pitlick, Rachel Freitas, Jasmine Rodriguez Santiago, Mary Masseth here, Megan Gerber, your quarterback, is one, which is tough for sure. We'll see how that turns out, though. I don't know what that eligibility is looking like at all, but we'll see for sure. Caitlin Outhouse is a senior. Let's see. Nia Carson, a senior. So you definitely have a couple of seniors. It's going to be tough to replace your quarterback, especially when, she did so much for you there. But, that is a later issue. For now, Brockport is the conference champions, and they should be proud of that. Now, let's go ahead and look at Elmira here. Second year. Technically, this was their first year, but second year, they improve obviously here to 6-6. They went to the conference championship. Unfortunately, just fell short to Brockport by 5. Obviously, nothing to be ashamed of here. Still plenty to build on. When you look at this Elmira team here, let's look at the seniors for the squad. You do have some tough ones. Michaela D'Angelo, Amariona Dixon, which is tough for sure, has been so electric these last couple weeks here. You have, I think it's Natalie Mussolino. Faith Ingber is another tough one as well. And then you have, hopefully I'm pronouncing this right, but Verity Romuto, and that's tough. Dixon is a tough loss. Ingber is a tough loss as well. But that does mean you bring back players like Nyla Caping, Kylie Hook. You bring back your quarterback, Hannah Smith, who showed a lot of flashes of greatness, right? Obviously, getting you here and making it happen there. You have some players to definitely, pick from and build from for sure here and feel good about moving forward. We will see how they respond next year. I do feel like the Empire 8 is going to be a very interesting conference as it continues to grow. And, more players are being brought in from all over. So, there you go. But for now, your Empire 8 conference champions is Brockport as they go ahead and take down Elmira 36-31 in a thriller of a game. Alrighty, now let's go ahead and start with the Atlantic East Conference Tournament here. Second year of this one. Basically how it's set up is that you have a play-in to start. You have number 3 Immaculata facing off with number 6 Penn State Schuylkill. And by the way, I assume these are going by the conference standings. And then you have number 4 Newman playing number 5 Holy Family. The winner of the Immaculata Penn State Schuylkill game would go ahead and play number 2 Marymount. And then the winner of Newman versus Holy Family would go ahead and play number 1 Eastern. And so let's go ahead and start in the play-in. Number 3 Immaculata versus Penn State Schuylkill here. Immaculata goes ahead and dominates this one 27-0. This one was just not close at all. Devin Cosgrove, 207 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, also 16 rushing yards as she spread out the ball and did a really good job offensively, just keeping them on their toes. Then rushing-wise, Jacqueline Molini led with 31 rushing yards, also had 8 receptions, 77 yards, and a receiving touchdown as their leading receiver. Eliana Zatskowski, 7-for-63 and a touchdown. Natalie Dodd, 127-yard reception, and Taylor Egan, 4-for-7 and a touchdown. Defensively, for Immaculata, played ball on both sides here. Teresa Japa, 9 flag posts, 2 interceptions here. Frankie Bronco also had an interception as they held it down over there. Playmaker of this game for me has to be Devin Cosgrove, as she played a very efficient game in this one to go ahead and get Immaculata to the next round here. For Penn State Schuylkill, their season unfortunately ends here. Avery Brown, 154 passing yards, 3 interceptions. Miranda Morstadt, 7,476. Kenzie Stoller, 3,451. Where, there's a little bit more production here, more than there has been for this team in the past, but just not enough scoring, unfortunately, for this squad. Looking at them defensively, Michaela Johnson had an interception. It looks like Abigail Jones had a sack here. Their lead flag puller was Sierra Wisniewski, but not enough as Immaculata goes ahead and wins a dominant 27 over them. For Penn State Schuylkill in their second season here, unfortunately, they played 25 games. They played a lot of games, but went 10-15 compared to last season where they only played 15 and went 1-14. Definitely improvement this year. Playing a lot more games this year as well. You get a lot of experience with this squad whenever you get to play a whole bunch. And just taking a look at who they have here that may not be coming back. They have Michaela Hill, which is tough. She is technically a senior, so that's somebody that may not come back, as well as Sierra Wisniewski, a team captain for them who did it all, another senior for them who may not be coming back. But other than that, they bring back their freshman quarterback, Avery Brown, who grew a whole bunch, Miranda Morstadt, and Kaylee Morgan, just a couple other players to name out there. We'll see if they can build on that moving forward. But for now, their season is over. Now, let's go to the other play in here. We have Newman, who's at number 4, facing off with number 5, Holy Family, and a little bit of an upset here. Holy Family takes down Newman 33-7. This game just started way too slow for Newman. Their first pass was intercepted, and Holy Family would respond with a touchdown right after that. It was 21-0 at half for Holy Family, and that is just a lead that is way too much here, as Newman just could not find their footing at all offensively. Maish had 113 passing yards and 75 on the ground. Marie Berry was their top receiver with 66 yards, which was all in one catch, by the way. And then defensively had some players who pulled some passes or pulled some flags here, but just could not get it going, as Holy Family gets a big win to go ahead and move on to the next round of the playoffs. Now, the next round here, we have number 1 Eastern. They would actually host Holy Family. Let's look at that one, because this one would not be close. Eastern runs away with this one 36-6, outscoring them 22-6 in the second half. They're already up by 14 at halftime, and just not looking back at all. Kira Green, 195 yards, 1 passing touchdown, but it was Kyla Massenberg who did a lot of damage on the ground. 147 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns on 9 attempts here. Drea Johnson had a rushing touchdown. Also, Drea Johnson was the leader in receiving yards and receptions, 10 receptions for 112 yards here. Molly Shellpepper added a touchdown, 2 for 21 on the day, as they whooped on Holy Family in this one. Defensively, Stephanie White, Snia Tyler, and Drea Johnson each had 4 flag pulls. Kyla Massenberg also adds on a sack. Morgan Owens with a sack as well, as they dominate in this one. Your playmaker of the game, in my opinion, probably has to be Kyla Massenberg. Add on the sack on defense, plus the 3 touchdowns and some on offense here. That is definitely big time. For Holy Family, it just felt like way too much, way too fast here. Alice Davis, 7 of 19, 86 yards, 1 touchdown. No turnovers, though. Only sacked 1 time. Davis had negative 10 rushing yards on 7 attempts, which obviously is tough right there. Alanis Clavel Lopez led with 61 rushing yards. Alexis Tina McLeod, 2 for 67 and a touchdown. Clavel Lopez had 3 for 26 here, but just not enough going on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, also not enough going on over there. Alanis Clavel Lopez, 12 flag pulls, 1 sack there. Kylie Cooley and Savia Campbell had a deflection each, but just not much going on, as Eastern goes ahead and punches their ticket to the conference championship once more, leaving Holy Family behind. Now, for Holy Family, just looking at their year, 9-9 on the season compared to last year, where they, I think, only won 4 games for them. This year they go 9-9, which is not bad at all. Had some tough losses, some tough close losses. I think maybe would have put the confidence of this team at a different level here. But I mean, you lose to Marymount 0-14. You lose to Newman in overtime 19-20. Those are losses that matter. Immaculata 7-14. They showed that they had the ability to play teams close here. And unfortunately, they just could not quite figure out Eastern despite playing them twice. So a tough go for them, but definitely improvement as Holy Family is now 9-9 in a great spot. Let's go ahead and look at the roster real quick here. No seniors currently listed on the roster, so they do return back the majority of the crew, like in Alice Davis, Kieran Cusick, Alanis Clavel Lopez, who's only a freshman, by the way, Alexis Tina McLeod as well, another freshman, Kylie Cooley, Savannah Campbell, Bernadette Herb. I mean, just so many players that are coming back here. For Holy Family, they're for sure going to get better, just like they did from last year to this year. I look forward to seeing the development of Alice Davis, of Kieran Cusick, of Alanis Clavel Lopez, Alexis Tina McLeod, and see where they are at this time next season. But for now, this season, Eastern goes to the Atlantic East Championship, awaiting the winner of this Marymount versus Immaculata game. And let's go right into it here. Immaculata held scoreless as Marymount wins 19-0. Most of these scores coming in the second half, where Marymount would outscore them 13-0 right there. Looking at the stats, Kara Vollmer, 11-15, 76 yards, 1 pick. Justania Velez, 7 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick here. Velez also had 62 rushing yards on 12 carries and a rushing touchdown. Vollmer had 5 carries for 26 yards and a rushing touchdown there. And then Vollmer also caught a receiving touchdown, a little 2-yarder, to go ahead and extend that lead for them. Defensively, they played lights out, held them to 0. Leslie Villegas here, 10 flag pulls, 3 tackles for loss, 1 sack. Victoria Johnson, 1 sack. And I think it's Sakira Sterling grabbed an interception for this defense. On the other hand, you have Immaculata here, who just couldn't get going offensively. Cosgrove, 9-19, 59 yards, 1 interception. Molini, 10 rushing yards. Taylor Egan, 2 for 26. Eliana Satskowski, 3 for 21 here. That is pretty much it. I think they got held underneath, 100 offensive yards, which is crazy. Defensively for them, I mean, I don't know. They had them to 19 points, but it doesn't matter when your offense isn't doing anything. Teresa Japa, Jacqueline Molini, each with 8 flag pulls. Molini with a pick. Satskowski with a pick, so they did win the turnover battle even then. Yeah, they did. And they couldn't beat Marymount, so a tough go for them. But Marymount back in the Atlantic East Championship here after their 19-0 win over Immaculata. Oh, and actually, before we move on, let's talk about Immaculata's future real quick here. Not a lot of seniors. I think most of these teams don't have a whole bunch. Samantha Rivera is a senior. That's kind of tough. I'm not going to lie there. Ellie O'Mara is a grad student technically, but other than that, you bring back pretty much everyone else. Taylor Egan, Devin Cosgrove, Eliana Zatskowski, Jacqueline Molini. You got a decent squad. Teresa Japa as well. You have a decent squad to build off of. We'll see how much they can improve between now and next year. But you know what? Let's go ahead and hop into the Atlantic East Conference Championship. We got number 1 Eastern versus number 2 Marymount. Split the regular season matchups here. I think Marymount got the first one, Eastern got the next one, and that would actually be the one that would give them the 1 seed here. And so this is a big game. Also, they met in the national, or not the national championship, but in the Atlantic East Championship last season as well. So a lot on the line, for these two squads who have been playing each other increasingly closer throughout this season. And so let's hop right into this game. In the first quarter, Marymount will take the early lead in the first with a Kara Vollmer to Alexandria Veltri 39-yard touchdown to put them up 6-0 with 8:17 left in the first quarter. Following that, not too much would happen. A defensive struggle by both sides here as it would stay at 6-0 into the third quarter, where Jasenia Velez would cap off a Marymount touchdown drive with a 3-yard rush to go ahead and make it 12-0. So still not out of hand, but Eastern really looking, they got to get going here sooner than later, and that is what happens right before the fourth quarter. Eastern finally gets on the board thanks to a Kira Green to Molly Shellpepper touchdown to make it 12-6. So still plenty of time here, but neither team would be able to score or really get much progress offensively as things got tight and the time went down here. Eventually, Marymount would be able to hold them off by possessing the football and would become your two-time Atlantic East champ in a very close one, 12-7 over Eastern. Sorry, not 12-6, 12-7 over Eastern. They did get the PAT there. So a massive win here. Very gritty by both sides, as it felt like there's just not much progress going on for big chunks of the game here. But Marymount found a way to get it done, playing a decently complete game. Maybe it could have been a little bit more complete here, but scoring in the first, I want to say, or at least in the first half and second half, is obviously never a bad thing at all. Now, looking at the stats here, let's start with Eastern. We'll talk about them. Kira Green did not have a bad game. 17 of 25, 102 yards, 1 touchdown. Only took 1 sack here. Just really struggled for the rest of this team getting open and finishing off drives. Kyle Massenberg had 67 rushing yards in this one. Green adding on another 11, as well as Maya Madison with 13 there. Receiving-wise, Jariah Johnson, 10 receptions, 58 yards here. But nobody else had more than 3 receptions here. Demaine Moyer had 1 reception for 20 yards. Molly Shellpepper had 2 for 19 and a touchdown. Maybe could have gotten her the ball a little bit more, honestly. Kyle Massenberg added on a reception and 4 yards here, but ultimately this Eastern offense just did not produce enough. Didn't lose the turnover battle. In fact, Marymount lost it and Eastern still lost, and that definitely says something about the offense that played that last week. Now, looking at Eastern, Massenberg had 8 flagpoles tied with Sanaya Tyler, who had 8. Massenberg with a sack there, and Daniel Moyer with an interception for Eastern. But like I said, just offensively could not capitalize on that, as Marymount would win the close one. For Marymount, though, Kara Volmer, 11 of 12, super efficient, only 1 incompletion, 1 passing touchdown for them. Caleb Barr, 5 of 37, Jasenia Velez, 8 of 18, 8 rushes for 18 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Volmer adding on 12 rushing yards there. And then receiving-wise, Alexandria Veltri had that long 39-yard touchdown. And that is pretty much it. Not a lot of passing in this one. Samaya Barnes, 2 for 23. Caleb Barr, 4 for 20. Jasenia Velez, 4 for 16. And Isabella Silvestri, 1 for 1 yard there. Defensively, Leslie Villegas led with 7 flagpoles, and Jasenia Velez had a sack on defense. I would go ahead, and this was tough here because they played in some really close games where, everyone's contribution mattered. But for Marymount, the playmaker of the week for them has to be Jasenia Velez. In this game was 4 of 16, caught the ball 4 times for 16 yards, had 18 rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, 2 flagpoles, and a sack. I think that definitely matters. It also matters that, looking back at the semi game here as well against Immaculata, she had a passing touchdown, rushing touchdown, and was their second lead receiver with 3 for 24 there for them. Now, let's go ahead and look at Eastern here before we move on. Just move on and kind of close things up. Eastern, last year, the runner-ups, they won, I think, 14 games, won 14-4 this year, played more games, won 20-3. This conference championship was also closer by a score, too. This is a team that they actually beat by 1 just a couple weeks ago, and so I know they're sick to their stomach here. But, this is a team that showed a lot of growth here. They do lose some pretty key players. I will say that. Dominique Geiger, Dominique Moyer, that's obviously tough. Both listed as seniors. Stephanie White, Jariah Johnson is another one. Maya Madison as well. Hope Gather. But, they have a young enough group. Kira Green will be back again. Sinead Tyler will be back as well. Molly Shellpepper will be a sophomore. Could maybe see a more expanded role as a receiver, already turning up as a freshman there. Kyla Massenberg will be back, which is obviously huge for them. They'll be back. They're going to have to reload. Things are going to look a little bit different for them. But, if you're Eastern, at the end of the day, I still think it's a pretty successful end to your season. The only thing that could have made it better was a championship, and if it's one thing that you're listing, then it could have been worse, for sure, right? Now for Merrimack, let's talk about them. This is a team that it felt like had a very rocky start to the season, then eventually they got it together, and then you had some struggles as well near the end of the regular season, and then they got it together again, and they won some close games here, but it does show that the gap is closing. We'll see if they can continue to develop and stay ahead of that gap, though. Going into next year, it looks like they pretty much return everyone. I'm just scrolling through. Yep. I don't see any seniors. If there are any players that leave, it's not because they graduated. So there you go there. Kara Vollmer will be entering her senior year, which I know will be exciting for them, being the most experienced quarterback in this league and the winningest one so far. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how they reload moving forward, but a second Atlantic East title is never a bad thing. So there you go there. Congratulations to Marymount, who is your Atlantic East champion with the win over Eastern 12-7.
Hey y'all, it is Kodey Stoffer here in one of my few segments on this episode, and this one is actually not covering conference tournaments like the other ones are. This is just my Division II recap here. Not a lot of games, but still want to go over some of the action, including a battle of two heavyweights here. Roberts Wesleyan, undefeated coming in, and Villa Maria on an 8-game winning streak here. Let's go ahead and tune into the action. So in this ball game here, Roberts Wesleyan, as I mentioned, came in undefeated. Meanwhile, Villa Maria did have that 8-game win streak, and Roberts Wesleyan would start off in the lead here, scoring 6-0 early here in the first quarter, but something profound would happen, and something kind of crazy to read and deliver to you, the listener, also occurred as Villa Maria capitalized when Kayleani Diaz caught a pass from Alana Bashore, and with the PAT, they would go up 7-6, and this would be the first time in Roberts Wesleyan's season that they have trailed. All season, the first time that they were losing, they were down 7-6 here in the first quarter. But the Redhawks would not be down with that, and Amy Turner would find Barbara Frankova here for a 10-yard touchdown that would give them a 13-7 lead heading into halftime, following a tough defensive stop brought to you by the absolute monster rusher that was Aaliyah McCoy. More on her overall performance later. But in the second half, Villa Maria would come out swinging, and Brianna Shalinsky would find Kiara Mercado to tie the game 13-all in the third quarter. Now, for Roberts Wesleyan, or R-Dub, as I'm naming him since they pick up so many of them, it was Anna Varland who passed to Turner. Now, Turner, that is right, the same one who threw a touchdown earlier. She would be on the receiving end of this touchdown, 17 yards and a 20-13 lead here in the third quarter. But the third quarter action wasn't done, and the Vikings weren't either, as Kiara Mercado once again putting the Vikings on the board here, would rush for a touchdown here, but the PAT would be no good, so they would still trail 19-20. But Amy Turner, capitalizing, punctuating, exclamation pointing this game in favor of Roberts Wesleyan, would get a rushing touchdown to put them up to 26, and that would be the final score of this game. Roberts Wesleyan outlasts Villa Maria 26-19 to remain undefeated and sink Villa Maria to 17-3 on the season. Now we take a look at the box score, and it reflects just how close these teams were in this game, but also you can read those small disparities in the numbers here. In the final yards, Roberts Wesleyan outgained the Vikings 288 to 258, but the Vikings ran the ball more, going for nearly 150 on the ground. The Redhawks, as one might imagine, were more effective through the air, going for 192 yards to Villa's just 114, and most importantly, as a part of winning football, turned the ball over less while moving more effectively throughout the game. They won the turnover battle 2-1, and also won the not punting battle 3-1 as well in favor of the Redhawks. Now for Villa Maria, Chiara Mercado ran for a score, caught for a score, and had over 80 total yards from scrimmage, while Alana Bouchard also ran for over 50 yards for the Vikings. Mercado was also merciless on the defensive end, going for a team-high 8 pulls and 2 sacks, while Kiara LeBreton matched her in flag pulls while also notching an interception and 3 PBUs for the Vikings. Meanwhile, Amy Turner, definitely the playmaker of this game, absolute menace, 101 passing yards, 2 passing scores, 88 rushing yards, the final touchdown of the game on the ground, and also a receiving touchdown. That is a hat trick of some variety. I don't know if we have a Gordie Howe type name for this, where you catch one, rush one, and throw one, but we got to come up with something along those lines for flag players here, especially ones that are as versatile and dominant as Amy Turner, who has been essential to this Wesleyan season here. And as far as other athletes and playmakers for this team, I earlier mentioned Barbara Frankova here. She led both teams in receiving yards at 102 and also had that touchdown reception and an interception on defense along with Laura Granada as they won the turnover deficit. But dialing back to Aaliyah McCoy, absolute monster, 15 tackles and 2 sacks, causing problems for Villa Maria all day, helping create turnovers and incompletions en route to Robert Wesleyan's still undefeated season. That all took place on April 24th, as this week of coverage is April 20th to 26th, and there are only a few more games down the stretch here, as Ursuline would fall to Wittenberg 32-6, could not find a box score for that game. But moving on to Sunday, Villa Maria would have some pent-up anger as they would face off against Deauville University and Damon University. They would go for 123 points in these two games. Apparently, it was senior day for this squad, and I could tell that they were pretty PO'd about the results of that last game here, as they just continued to pour on the points in these two games, forcing turnovers, getting big receptions. I mean, they at one point were up 60-6 in the third quarter, but it would be Morgan Mersdorf who would put the final nail in the coffin here for 66 in their game against Damon University. And as aforementioned, they would also score over 50 on Deauville, but Deauville would roll it downhill and pick up a win over Damon University 32-7. Now that's all I have for the D2 action this week. I know not as exciting as the Conference Carolinas tournament from last week, but we still have a couple of other tournaments, so please stay tuned for the recaps and playmakers of the week from all of those tournaments where these teams are playing the biggest games against some of their biggest foes, heading forward and setting precedents. Hello, everybody. It is Kodey Stoffer here with a conference recap, the Northern Area Collegiate Conference here that is on the D3 level. This involved 4 teams. This involved Marian University, the Sabres, Aurora University, the Spartans, Benedictine of Illinois in Chicago, as well as the Rockford Royals, a team that both Coach V and I got to see at the Flag Frenzy last year in Campbellsville, and one that we hope to visit again as well with a ton of good flag football. But That being said, the tournament was seeded, or structured, I should say, as follows. Marion was the host site for this tournament, and they would take on Aurora in the first game of the day, and then Benedictine and Rockford would play. That would leave a consolation game between the losers of those first two games and then the championship game. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started, as both of these semifinal games were absolute madness and defensive driven. Both these semifinal games, I will tell you right now without spoilers, 19 total points were scored amongst these two games. So let's go ahead and dive in to how those were going to happen and how it went down. Now, Aurora versus Marion was the first one, and there were only 13 total first downs in this game, 5 total turnovers, and plenty of sacks and incompletions. Kendall Graves for Marion had 3 interceptions all to herself. Meanwhile, Sofia Vizcarra, had the 4th for Marion, making this an absolute nightmare performance for Kaylin Morgan. But under center on the other side, Holly Goodwin was not having her best day either, 38% completion percentage. And to their credit here, the Spartans had 7 total tackles for loss from 5 different players and got a Gabrielchik interception to go with 7 pass breakups from another 5 players. It was a team defensive effort up north. Meanwhile, back on the Marion side, Niadang Awak had a monstrous outing, going for 3 tackles for loss to lead Marion, and one of those being a sack to go with Emily Eastham's pass rush as well for a total of 2. And all of this would lead to a 0-0 final. In regulation, there ain't no ties in football, and especially in a semifinal to a tournament, so to overtime we would go. Aurora, starting with the football, they would play it safe and get a direct snap to Anderson, who picked up a few yards. Now on second down here, despite her awfully long day, they go back to Kaylin Morgan here. She gets the snap, rolls right, and throws an absolute dot of a touchdown to Jenna Grice here with the receiving touchdown. Finally, Kaylin Morgan gets one pass to go her way, and at the absolute imperative time here, as that would give them the first score of the game to go up 6-0 in overtime. Meanwhile, on the PAT, they would call a direct snap to Anderson, who would sneak in, stumbling, rumbling, bumbling, and score to make it a 7-0 ball game, and finally get some points on the board here in overtime. Now, Marion, they do have a chance to respond in this college format here, and the first play was a really weird speed/jump pass option that luckily was incomplete. On the second play, Marion would try and throw a jump ball to the back right corner of the end zone that does draw a pass interference flag and kept Marion's second down, but now only giving them 5 yards to go. They would call a quick speed option left that picks up a couple yards, setting up about 3rd down and 3. And now I'm wondering, with it being 3rd down, will Aurora get a shutout to seal the win? Well, Marion lines up 2 in the backfield. Goodwin is deep, and they do a direct snap, and the tailback throws, almost getting intercepted and ending the ball game here, but it's going to be a penalty. This is on Marion, and it pushes them back 5 yards and makes it 3rd down and about 8. Goodwin here on 3rd down gets a snap, throws left, and is almost intercepted again here. Marion looking truly lost out there and just unfamiliar with the end zone. And now they are facing 4th and 8 with their season on the line, and they are going to take a timeout, try and cool down and gather their thoughts. But Aurora, being the chess masters themselves, will respond in turn with a timeout themselves here. And now with both teams taking a timeout, getting some looks that they want to see, it is going to be time for Marion to line up 4th and 8. Goodwin gets the snap, throws over the middle, and it's incomplete. But wait, before Aurora can celebrate, there is a penalty on the field, and it's going to be pass interference, giving Marion yet another chance, but this time from the 4-yard line. Marion comes out 2-by-2 formation, and the snap is low and to the bottom right of the quarterback's feet, but she picks it up and throws an out route to number 8, Kendall Graves. What a game she is having. All of the interceptions and now the touchdown, saving the Sabres and giving them another chance in this game. But we still need a PAT. We don't want to count our chickens before they hatch, but Marion here, not interested in extending this game, goes for 2 and wants to go for the win. They line up, trips right, one receiver down on the left side, far away from us on the sideline. Goodwin gets the snap, throws over the middle. It's in the receiver's hands, but the defender is contesting it, and the pass is not reeled in. Aurora wins an unlikely one to punch their ticket to the championship here. Marion, the host site, left heartbroken and devastated. We'll have to wait to see who loses this next game to see who they have in the consolation. Now on the other side of this bracket, we have Benedictine and Rockford, and it's crazy to think that there was only one score in this game because Rockford outgained Benedictine 180-47, forced more punts, but, football is a game where if you play it cleanly, it helps you out. They committed more penalties and had the lone turnover of the day for Benedictine to push this game and all the way into the fourth quarter before either team was able to score. But you look at Rockford's defense here, and they dominated 7 tackles for loss. Contagia Mills leading the way with 3 of those TFLs and a sack. But it would be her offense that would help tip the scales here. Now, her passing effort left a lot to be desired. She threw a brutal tip drill interception into triple coverage that Benedictine capitalized on to pitch a shutout in the first half, as that would conclude basically the end of the second quarter here. But with 5 minutes to go and on their own 14, Mills would begin to chip away at this Eagles defense with opportune runs, not to mention a pass to Shelton that got past midfield with under 2 minutes to go. And after another short pass to her right, on the next play, Mills would drop back, roll left, sprint down the left sideline, evading 2 flagpoles, racing down, and would score 6-0. Rockford takes the lead with 1:18 to go, and the Royals slam the door on Benedictine on the other side of the ball to advance to the championship here. Now for the third and fourth place consolation game between Marion and Benedictine, Marion would run away with this one. Holly Goodwin putting together a nice game, 13 of 21 for 145 yards and 4 touchdowns to no interceptions. Kendall Graves and Niadang Awak both caught a pair of scores. Meanwhile, Reagan Montello took a pick 6, 56 yards to the house as a part of a hat trick of interceptions. And joining her in that turnover party was Daniela Shanaim and Sofia Vizcarra. Marion ran away with this game 34-0 to secure their spot as the third place in this tournament. In the championship game between Rockford and Aurora here, Rockford's Quintasia Mills would find Maureen Shelton for a 19-yard touchdown to get the action started, but Aurora would rock off 33 consecutive points to be crowned the first ever Northern Area Collegiate Conference's flag football champions. Kaylin Morgan was insanely efficient, throwing more touchdowns than incompletions, 16 of 18 for 219 yards and 4 scores. Emily Gabrielchek did a lot of the damage, accounting for 40% of the team's receptions and 97 yards with a score. Meanwhile, Jemiah Anderson got hers as well, catching 2 touchdowns on just 3 receptions for 67 yards. And Claire Strong only had 2 catches, but one went for 51 yards and a score. It is sure to leave an impression. Quintasia Mills did everything in her power to keep this game competitive for Rockford. She had 270 total yards throwing and running the football while spreading the ball out well. Tay Simpson, Mercedes Morales, and Maureen Shelton all had over 5 receptions, but they just didn't find the end zone enough to keep this game close. Strong would also notch both interceptions for Aurora. Meanwhile, Jemiah Anderson recorded the only sack of this game. Meanwhile, Leisha Jolacour put together an awesome effort for the Royals, notching a team high in all 3 defensive categories of tackles, sacks, and TFLs, 8, 3, and 4, respectively, for those wondering. But with the ball only getting out quickly in deep plays downfield, there's only so much to be done. So congratulations to the Aurora Spartans on their crown. as for the Playmaker of the Week for this tournament, this was kind of a brutal one to choose from because, well, it has to go to Aurora, right? Because they were the tournament champions. And while Kaylin Morgan had a phenomenal championship game, 16 of 18, 219 yards, 4 touchdowns, it's hard to shake off her performance in that first game against Marion, 12 of 21, 151 yards, and 4 picks. But, the one touchdown that she had would be the one to Jenna Grice, who would help pull them up ahead. So I thought about Kaylin Morgan. I thought about Jenna Grice here. I also thought about Jemiah Anderson, who had the PAT on the direct snap, also led the team in 7 tackles in that first game and 1 for loss. Meanwhile, in the second game, also had a strong performance, 3 receptions, 67 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. She also defensively had the only sack for Aurora on top of 4 tackles, that one going for loss, obviously. So Jemiah Anderson had a strong case. Claire Strong played very strong in the second game in the championship, 7 tackles, 2 interceptions, also had 79 yards on 2 receptions for the offensive side of the ball. But, 6 tackles, a TFL in the first game, not as prevalent in the receiving game, and by not as prevalent, I mean didn't have a single one, but punted and helped control the field. There were a lot of different ways that I could go, but I wanted to go for the player that I think had the most cumulative impact across the 2 games to name as my conference championship tournament MVP, and that is going to go to Emily Galbraithik here. In the first game, 3 receptions, 37 yards, not super impactful on offense. However, in this defensively driven dogfight that they found themselves in against Marion, it's hard to overlook the only interception that Aurora forced was from Emily here. She led her team in tackles, or tied for the lead in tackles across both games, notching a total of 14 flag pulls across both games. Had a tackle for loss in that first game and an interception that I think every single down mattered. And with her flying around on defense, that helps this team win that game to advance to the championship, where she led her team in receptions, in receiving yards, caught a touchdown, and was still tied for the lead in tackles with 7 and had 2 pass breakups as well to her name. Overall, probably just the most cumulative impact would go to Emily Galbraithik here, and I am so sorry if I'm saying that wrong, if it's supposed to be Galbraithik here, but either way, you should know who you are because you are the Playmaker of the Week for this tournament and for the Aurora Spartans as the first ever Northern Area Collegiate Conferences champions here on the D3 collegiate flag football level. Hey y'all, Kodey Stauffer here, coming to you with the Sun Conference recap here. Sun Conference, obviously one of the original conferences here in the NAIA flag football scene, one of the most imperative foundational conferences with some of the best teams in the country here. And this season is no different here, as the 6 teams that qualified included Warner and Kaiser, who had byes in this tournament. Then you had Life against Thomas and St. Thomas and Weber in those quarterfinal games. So in the first game here, Life would run away against Thomas 32-7, marked by a 20-point second quarter that would leave the Nighthawks in the Running Eagles rearview mirror. Cheyenne Brooks had a good game, 19 of 29 for 217 yards and 3 scores, finding Branham for 2 of those, and Alora Near-Pruum for the third. Branham was also getting work done on the ground with 2 additional rushing scores, and I think that this is Life's first playoff win, if my memory serves me correct. Meanwhile, for this Thomas team, they just seemed to run out of gas by this point in the season and couldn't really do much to keep up, as Life punches their ticket to a game against Warner. Meanwhile, St. Thomas and Weber don't know how to be normal about their games. They're always dogfights, and this quarterfinal game would be no different. Now, the Bobcats would strike first as Sharice Newton would lead an 11-play, 66-yard drive that ate up nearly 6 minutes to go up 6-0 after a great top shelf pass to Newton, from Newton to Perez Moore. This came out of a bunch formation with a motion here where Sharice would roll out and put that pass right where her receiver would get it. The defense would then get a stop, and Perez Moore would have another reception at the perfect time to pick up a first down on fourth to close the first quarter. This drive, however, would stall out due to a killer Weber pass rush, and St. Thomas would have to punt. Weber's drive would get into Bobcat territory but stall out and turnover on downs just outside the red zone, giving the Bobcats an opportunity to drive, and this would go all the way inside of the Warriors' 5-yard line when these pesky extra points have to have lingering consequences. And on a pass to the right, Sigmundi would kill an almost 2-score lead for St. Thomas with an interception in the end zone with 1:51 in the half. Later on in that drive, Weber's turnover would pay off offensively in a major way. As I quote Gino from the show, Weber pulls, quote, the nastiest hook and ladder, end quote, to take a lead as the pass finds Sigmundi over the middle, who seamlessly pitches to a Savannah Cox coming the other way, fakes a pitch on the speed option, and turns on the burners all the way for the score. The PAT to Bolser would be good and bolts in this Weber lead by 1.7 to 6 heading into halftime. Now to start the second half, Weber would have the ball, but Mia Salas would get an interception, or Maya Salas to get an interception to start the second half, and St. Thomas would look to waste no time to try and go up and take the lead back. However, Sigmundi, in a determined senior effort, would force an interception, and multiple laterals would catapult the Warriors past midfield to start their drive in a super roundabout way of gaining yardage through exchanges of interceptions. However, a poor decision would mar this Warriors drive as a pass is thrown into double coverage. Mia Hastings coming out of the muck with an interception, racing down the near sideline all the way for a St. Thomas touchdown. The PAT to 21 is good, and it's a 13-7 St. Thomas lead. Now, Weber, not afraid to use their best players when they need to, would go to the well of Riley Bolser again, and again, with the final one yielding points, Clam throwing it right to Bolser, evading one defender, sprinting up and cutting inside for the score, tying it up at 13. The PAT would be no good, and this score would remain tied into the fourth quarter. St. Thomas here would get massive pressure, leading to a Weber slip, and they would respond with a clutch fourth down conversion for St. Thomas to get into the red zone. Now, a highly contested pass on third down would force yet another fourth down for St. Thomas, where they would call a timeout with 2.5 minutes to talk it over. Now, the Bobcats come out bunched up just like they did on their first score. They motion QB2 in motion just like their first score. But on this one, it's going to be Sharice Newton who keeps herself and races to the end zone. Bolser's waiting for her, but Newton makes a move, extends, and scores. The PAT, however, is no good, and Weber has the opportunity to run the 2-minute drill just like they did to end the first half to try and come back and tie or win this game. Now, the Warriors would cross midfield right at about the 2-minute warning, and that is looking good. They have time, they have timeouts, and they are chipping away. Clam completes a dump off for a first down to get into the red zone, and that leaves about a minute left. Now, an incomplete pass is batted at the line, but there is a penalty downfield that advances the Warriors anyway. Now, Clam's going to keep right, and Weber will use a timeout facing about 2nd down and 12 to go. Weber has 1 timeout, and STU has 2 timeouts, but the offense almost comes to a halt here as they now face 4th down from about 10 yards away and their season on the line. 39 seconds to go. Weber comes out 2-by-2 look. Bolser in the slot right. Weber going back to the well, throws that crosser route that is lateral to the receiver. She throws the speed option, but Mia Hastings makes the game-saving flag pull, and that is ball game. St. Thomas able to kneel the rest of this game out with a 19-13 lead. Mia Hastings with both the final flagpole and the pick six is easily my playmaker of the game for that one. As we head into the semifinals here, St. Thomas getting an opportunity to take on Kaiser. The Seahawks, however, have plans to make their fifth Sun Conference championship here, and they run away 32-6 over St. Thomas to punch yet another ticket. Ava Wallace here, 28-42, 271 yards, 3 touchdowns to 2 picks while running for another touchdown. Rivera also had a passing touchdown, with 4 different receivers catching touchdowns. Janasia Wilson, however, being the most consistent receiver, 10 receptions for 89 yards. Defensively, Madison Koger had 2 interceptions in addition to Dakota Moberg's in the strong showing, limiting St. Thomas to just 6. To the Bobcats' credit, Maya Salas and Mia Hastings, who played very well in the Weber game, came back and brought the noise as both had an interception and led the Bobcats in flagpoles with 8 and 6 respectively, but the offense just couldn't find enough big plays as their longest play of the day was only 11 yards, so they will fall short, and Kaiser will advance to the chip. Warner, in a probably not surprise to most, shuts out Life 38-0 to go to the same Sun Conference Championship. Much of the same story as it has been this season. Hutchinson, 29-39, 294 yards, 5 touchdowns. However, you did have Promise Cooper and Umi Gay here both getting an interception on Hutchinson to not leave her completely unblemished. But OMG and Jessica Finley had 8 receptions apiece. OMG found the end zone and the pair combined for 149 yards. Meanwhile, Vincent Cini had 2 receiving touchdowns, and Lux Alferman and Lober both added 1 to their name, with Bunting, OMG, and Finley all having interceptions. And now, the matchup that we were expecting, a Kaiser and Warner matchup here. Warner would start with the ball, picking up a first down on a kind of dangerous pitch here, but would find themselves in a 4th down situation to midfield. Ain't no thing. Hutchinson finds Vincenzini to get past midfield. Warner would then get all the way into the red zone before a Kaiser sack would push the Royals back to the 14 with under 6 minutes to go on 3rd down. After a short gain, it would be 4th down, and Warner would use a timeout to get dialed in, and it pays off as Hutchinson finds Finley for the opening score of this game to go up 6-0. Now, on the Kaiser drive, it's a story that we've heard a lot this year. Ava Wallace winding up and finding Moberg deep over the middle here, flipping the field for Kaiser with about 3 minutes in the first quarter and pushing them inside the 10-yard line. And just 2 plays later, Wallace and Moberg finish what they started on this drive to tie this game up 6-6. Now, Warner, remaining the firepower of the country here on the very first play, keeps back 2 blockers, buying Hutchinson time, winds up, takes a shot, and finds O'Mariah Gordon here on the catch, and just as quickly regain the lead here. Vincenzini scores on the PAT, making it 13-6 with 1:15. This was about a 10-second possession here, and this Royal squad would not look back. Just before halftime, it would be Hutchinson finding Avalon Lux Offerman on a contested catch to push them up 19-6 into half, and it wouldn't be until the 4th quarter on a deep Finley catch that put the Royals into Kaiser territory, along with a penalty that put them in striking distance where OMG had a rushing touchdown that would be the last score and crown the Royals as Sun Conference champions for the first time in school history, and also for the national tournament, promised them the number 1 seed here. Now, for the Royals here, congratulations to them and Mims. Shout out to our Colorado representation out there. Avalon Lux Offerman having a killer season and helping the Royals get this championship here. But, it's going to be hard to go with anyone else for Playmaker of the Week other than Catherine Hutchinson. Over these 2 games, in the first one, as aforementioned, 5 passing touchdowns, 294 yards. And then in the Sun Conference Championship, 344 yards and 3 touchdowns to just 1 pick, spreading the ball around, finding Finley, OMG, and Avalon for touchdowns in the second game, finding OMG, Vincenzini, Lux Offerman, and Lauber for touchdowns in that first game. Just a masterclass performance for the Royals' first ever championship. And Catherine Hutchinson, the probably unanimous upcoming MVP, and I don't want to say that that's even a spoiler for the All-PMC Awards here in that category at the end of the season, but for now, she'll have to settle for being the Playmaker of the Week here for the Sun Conference Tournament here. Quarterback 1, Catherine Hutchinson for Warner, and congratulations once again to the Royals on their Sun Conference Championship, first ever in school history here, and hopefully first of many if Catherine Hutchinson has anything to say about it.
All right, and that will wrap up this episode. Thank you so much for rocking with us. Just a quick update. So I don't think there will be a Thursday episode. We will go ahead and postpone that to next Tuesday. We'll still do, if there are any more games to be played this week, we'll do a little recap of that next Tuesday. But mostly next week will be all about the NAIA Invitational as well as that big RCX tournament coming up next weekend, which Kodey and Gino will be there live for. So make sure you go ahead and say hello to them, catch up with them. I know they would appreciate all the love and support per usual as they've been there the last couple years. But thank you again so much for rocking with us. And until next time, we'll catch you later.